She poured coffee like it was any other day, unaware that the man sitting by the window wasn't just another customer. Years ago, she'd saved a stranger from a car crash. Now that same man, a billionaire in disguise, was about to change her life forever. The morning light poured gently through the glass windows of Maple and Main Cafe, painting the wooden counter in soft amber tones. The smell of freshly ground coffee mingled with warm pastries and the faint hum of the espresso machine. Claire moved like someone who had learned to dance through exhaustion. Graceful, efficient, quietly kind. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands escaping to frame a face that carried both weariness and warmth. Every morning began this way, the same smile, the same rhythm, the same quiet determination that kept her world together. She greeted every customer as if they mattered, even when some barely looked up. The regulars knew her by name: truck drivers, college students, old couples who came to share breakfast. All part of the small universe she kept afloat with her kindness. "Morning, Hank." The usual, she'd say, her tone gentle but alive, as if each word had purpose. Beneath that calm surface, though, there was always a flicker of tension. A thought she kept pushing away: bills, rent, her brother's tuition. But she never let the worry show. Her life had taught her that strength wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, and often invisible. Just as the first rush began, the door chimed again. A man stepped in, unfamiliar. He wasn't like the others, not hurried, not distracted. He paused for a moment, eyes adjusting to the soft glow of the cafe. Tall, composed, his gray coat still carried the chill of the morning air. He scanned the room before walking toward the counter, his gaze settling briefly on Claire. "Good morning," he said softly. There was something deliberate in his tone, a patience that felt uncommon. She returned his greeting with the same warmth she gave everyone. "Welcome in. What can I get you?" He hesitated for a beat, studying the menu as if he hadn't read one in years. "Just a black coffee," he said finally. Simple, no sugar, no cream. But his eyes lingered on her a second longer than necessary. There was recognition there, faint and uncertain, like a melody he couldn't quite place. Claire, unaware, turned to prepare his order, humming quietly to herself. The way she moved, calm, unhurried, stirred something in him he couldn't explain. Outside, life went on. Cars passing, horns echoing, the city's rhythm unfolding as always. Inside, time seemed to slow for a moment. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed briefly, and for the first time, he smiled. A real smile, one that reached his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice almost a whisper. She nodded, thinking nothing of it, already reaching for the next order. But as he took his seat by the window, his expression changed. The quiet shock of memory flickered across his face. He had heard that voice before, years ago, in the chaos of sirens and shattered glass. A voice trembling but strong, saying, "Hold on, help's coming." Claire went on with her morning, unaware that the stranger at table 3 was not just another customer, and that her ordinary day was about to become the moment that changed everything. The morning light poured gently through the glass windows of Maple and Main Cafe, painting the wooden counter in soft amber tones. The smell of freshly ground coffee mingled with warm pastries and the faint hum of the espresso machine. Claire moved like someone who had learned to dance through exhaustion, graceful, efficient, quietly kind. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands escaping to frame a face that carried both weariness and warmth. Every morning began this way, the same smile, the same rhythm, the same quiet determination that kept her world together. She greeted every customer as if they mattered, even when some barely looked up. The regulars knew her by name: truck drivers, college students, old couples who came to share breakfast. All part of the small universe she kept afloat with her kindness. "Morning, Hank." The usual, she'd say, her tone gentle but alive, as if each word had purpose. Beneath that calm surface, though, there was always a flicker of tension, a thought she kept pushing away. Bills, rent, her brother's tuition. But she never let the worry show. Her life had taught her that strength wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady and often invisible. Just as the first rush began, the door chimed again. A man stepped in, unfamiliar. He wasn't like the others. Not hurried, not distracted. He paused for a moment, eyes adjusting to the soft glow of the cafe. Tall, composed, his gray coat still carried the chill of the morning air. He scanned the room before walking toward the counter, his gaze settling briefly on Claire. "Good morning," he said softly. There was something deliberate in his tone, a patience that felt uncommon. She returned his greeting with the same warmth she gave everyone. "Welcome in. What can I get you?" He hesitated for a beat, studying the menu as if he hadn't read one in years. "Just a black coffee," he said finally. Simple, no sugar, no cream. But his eyes lingered on her a second longer than necessary. There was recognition there, faint and uncertain, like a melody he couldn't quite place. Claire, unaware, turned to prepare his order, humming quietly to herself. The way she moved, calm, unhurried, stirred something in him he couldn't explain. Outside, life went on. Cars passing, horns echoing, the city's rhythm unfolding as always. Inside, time seemed to slow for a moment. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed briefly, and for the first time he smiled. A real smile, one that reached his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice almost a whisper. She nodded, thinking nothing of it, already reaching for the next order. But as he took his seat by the window, his expression changed. The quiet shock of memory flickered across his face. He had heard that voice before, years ago, in the chaos of sirens and shattered glass. A voice trembling but strong, saying, "Hold on, help's coming." Claire went on with her morning, unaware that the stranger at table 3 was not just another customer, and that her ordinary day was about to become the moment that changed everything. The next morning unfolded with the same routine, the hiss of the espresso machine, the chatter of regulars, the scent of cinnamon rolls drifting through the air. But something was subtly different. At the far corner table, by the wide window overlooking the street, the same man had returned. He wore a dark sweater this time, his coat folded neatly beside him, and in front of him sat a half-read newspaper he didn't seem to be reading at all. His eyes, calm yet watchful, followed Claire as she moved behind the counter. Ethan told himself he had come back because the coffee was good. But that wasn't the truth. He had been haunted since yesterday by her voice, her face, the trace of familiarity he couldn't shake. In his world of corporate boardrooms and private jets, he rarely noticed people anymore. But now every detail of her lingered in his mind. The careful kindness in her tone, the way she said, "Have a nice day," like she genuinely meant it. Claire didn't notice his quiet attention at first. She was too busy managing the steady flow of customers. She laughed with a college student who forgot his wallet, reassuring him he could pay later. She slipped an extra cookie to an old woman whose husband had passed last month, saying softly, "He used to love these. They're on the house." Each act was small, invisible to most, but not to Ethan. He'd built an empire by calculating risk and return. But here was a woman giving without expectation, offering warmth in a world obsessed with transaction. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen that. "Another black coffee?" she asked when she saw him still there. Her smile was polite, professional, but her eyes had that same gentle brightness. He nodded, and as she turned to prepare it, Ethan caught himself wondering who she was beyond this cafe. What kind of life she went home to. What dreams she might have tucked away. When she brought him his drink, he decided to ask something simple. "Do you ever get tired of this?" he said quietly, gesturing around. The counter, the orders, the rush. Claire tilted her head, considering the question. "Some days," she admitted, "but then someone walks in who's had a worse day than me. I guess it reminds me to be grateful I get another one." Her words hit him harder than expected. For years, he'd been living with the weight of survival, but gratitude was something he'd lost along the way. After she turned away, Ethan sat in silence, stirring his untouched coffee. He thought about the night of the accident, the blinding headlights, the cold rain, the sound of a woman's voice calling for help. He had searched hospitals, reporters, even police records. But she had vanished without a trace. Until now, he thought, watching Claire hand a latte to a laughing teenager. As she moved through the cafe, the morning sun caught her profile, illuminating her like a memory brought to life. Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't have proof yet, just a feeling, a certainty that defied logic. But something deep inside him whispered that the woman who had once pulled him from the wreckage was now standing behind that counter, pouring coffee with the same steady hands that once saved his life. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on her, a quiet decision forming behind his calm expression. He needed to know the truth, and he would find it, no matter how long it took. That night, long after the cafe had closed and the last chair was flipped onto a table, Claire wiped the counter with slow, tired motions. The street outside was quiet, only the faint glow of a street lamp spilling through the window. She paused for a moment, looking out into the empty street as if searching for something unseen. The man from the corner table had stayed until closing, polite, reserved, always thanking her before leaving. There was something about him that stirred an old ache she couldn't name, a feeling of déjà vu that clung to her long after he was gone. At the same time, across town, Ethan sat in his penthouse office surrounded by city lights that stretched like constellations. He wasn't working. His laptop screen showed an open folder, photos from years ago, headlines from the accident that nearly took his life. Tech Air survives highway crash, one read. He remembered the blur of metal and rain, the sound of his own heartbeat fading under the roar of the storm. And then, her voice, trembling, determined. You're going to be okay. Just breathe. He'd clung to that voice when the world went black. When he woke in the hospital, they told him a woman had pulled him from the wreck before the ambulance arrived, then vanished into the night. No name, no address. The only thing the paramedics remembered was her torn jacket sleeve and the faint scent of coffee on her hands. Ethan had built his fortune since then, but the mystery of that night never left him. Gratitude had turned to obsession, a need to find her, not to repay her, but to understand why someone would risk their life for a stranger. Now, sitting in the dim light of his office, he stared at the cafe's name printed on the receipt in his hand. Maple and Maine. He closed his eyes, replaying her voice from earlier that day. Soft, grounded, unmistakably the same. His pulse quickened. It's her, he whispered to himself, as if saying it made it real. The next day, Claire woke before dawn. Her apartment was small, 2 rooms, neat but worn. Her younger brother, Ryan, slept on the couch, college books scattered around him. She placed a blanket over his shoulders and smiled faintly. He was the reason she worked so hard, the reason she had given up school years ago. She had saved a stranger once, but in the process, her own dreams had been quietly buried beneath bills and responsibility. On her way to work, rain began to fall soft and steady. She pulled her jacket closer, and for a fleeting second, the sound of it brought back a memory she rarely let surface. Headlights cutting through the storm, a car veering off the road, her hands trembling as she pulled open a crumpled door. She had tried to forget, but sometimes when it rained, she could still feel the weight of his hand gripping hers. She shook the thought away as she reached the cafe, forcing a smile as she stepped inside. But when she looked up, her heart stumbled. The stranger was already there, seated in his usual corner, watching her quietly, like a man who had finally found the ghost he'd been chasing for years. The morning began with a soft drizzle that turned the cafe windows into watercolor streaks of gray and gold. Claire tied her apron, her hands steady though her mind felt clouded. The stranger was back again. Same table, same quiet eyes. There was something about the way he watched the world, like a man who had seen too much of it. He looked ordinary enough to anyone else, but Claire felt something deeper, something that unsettled and intrigued her all at once. Ethan had made his decision the night before. If she was truly the woman from that storm, he needed to be sure, not through her words, but through her nature. He didn't want to reveal himself too soon. He wanted to know if the person who had once risked everything for a stranger still carried that same heart after all these years. When Claire approached his table, he looked up with a hesitant smile. "You look busy," he said. She chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Busy keeps the lights on. I was wondering, he began slowly, if you could do me a favor. I lost my wallet. I think it fell out somewhere on my way here. He paused, feigning embarrassment. Would it be all right if I paid for coffee tomorrow? I promise I'm not trying to get a free drink. She looked at him for a moment, studying his expression. There was honesty in his voice, or maybe it was just humility. Don't worry about it, she said, waving her hand lightly. Coffee's on me today. Happens to the best of us. Ethan tilted his head, surprised by how easily she said it. No hesitation, no judgment. You don't even know me, he murmured. Maybe not, she replied, smiling faintly, but I know what it's like to need a little grace. You'd be surprised how far a cup of coffee can go. As she walked away, he sat back, his chest tightening. He'd expected kindness, but not this simple, unguarded generosity. Most people treated him differently the moment they recognized his name. All politeness and calculation. But Claire gave freely, not because of who he was, but because of who she was. A little later, the cafe grew busier. A businessman in a hurry spilled his drink and lashed out at Claire, accusing her of being careless. Ethan's jaw tightened as he watched, ready to intervene, but she diffused the situation with calm grace. It's fine, sir. I'll get you another one, no charge, she said, her voice steady, kind even to the undeserving. The man muttered and left, ashamed. Claire exhaled quietly, wiping the counter, her hands trembling only slightly when she thought no one was looking. Ethan noticed everything, her patience, her restraint, the quiet strength in her composure. He realized then that she wasn't just the woman who had saved his life. She was the kind of person who saved people every day without even realizing it. As he stood to leave, he placed a folded note on the counter beside her. For the coffee, and for the reminder that kindness still exists, he walked out into the rain, but inside his certainty solidified like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He had found her, not just the woman from that night, but the proof that real goodness still lived in the world, and he knew deep down that his test had just begun. The next morning, the cafe buzzed with unusual energy. The air felt heavier, charged with something Claire couldn't quite name. She arrived early, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, trying to shake off the strange feeling that today was different. Outside, a convoy of sleek, black cars lined the street, luxury vehicles that didn't belong in their quiet neighborhood. Curious faces pressed to the windows, whispering in surprise. Inside, the cafe owner fumbled with his phone, excitement written all over him. You won't believe this, he muttered. The guy who's been sitting in your section? That's Ethan Grayson. The Ethan Grayson, founder of Grayson Tech. The cup in Claire's hand froze midair. That's not funny, she said with a shaky laugh, but his wide eyes told her he wasn't joking. Before she could react, the door opened, and there he was. No coat this time, no pretense. He stepped inside, surrounded by a quiet authority that turned every head. His tailored suit caught the morning light, but his expression was soft, almost vulnerable. Claire's heart pounded as he approached the counter. Morning, he said gently, as if this were any other day. She tried to speak but found no words. You probably have questions, Ethan continued, his tone low, sincere. I owe you some answers. He glanced around, then back at her. Years ago, during a storm, my car crashed off the highway. I don't remember much, just a voice telling me to hold on. I never forgot that voice. The cafe was silent now. Claire felt the room blur around her, her breath shallow. That was you, she whispered. He nodded. And you were the one who pulled me out. I've been searching for you ever since. She blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. I didn't even know your name. I just did what anyone would do. No, Ethan said softly, shaking his head. Most people would have driven past that night, but you didn't. For a moment, neither spoke. The world outside continued, cars passing, rain tapping the glass, but inside everything stilled. He reached into his coat and placed an envelope on the counter. This is for you. Not as payment. As a beginning, her trembling hands opened it, a scholarship letter and a personal note in his handwriting. For the woman who reminded me what humanity looks like. Claire looked up, eyes shimmering, and for the first time, she saw not a billionaire before her, but a man whose life her kindness had quietly rewritten. The cafe lights felt softer that evening, as if the world itself had shifted tone. Claire sat at a corner table, the unopened envelope resting beside her coffee. Her co-workers had long gone home, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. The words Ethan had spoken still echoed in her mind. As a beginning, the offer inside felt too large, too unreal. A scholarship, a position at his design division, and a promise, a chance to build the life she had once only dreamed of. But dreams, she thought, came with fear. What if she wasn't good enough anymore? What if this was pity disguised as opportunity? The world had never handed her anything freely before. Why now? She traced the edge of the letter, thinking of Ryan, her younger brother, who'd once said, "Claire, one day someone's going to see what I already know. You're meant for more than this." Maybe that day had finally come. A soft knock at the glass broke her thoughts. Ethan stood outside, no bodyguards this time, no suit, just a quiet look that matched her own uncertainty. She unlocked the door, and he stepped in, the cool air following him. "Did you read it?" he asked. "I did," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just don't understand why." "You don't owe me anything," Ethan smiled faintly. "You're wrong about that. You saved my life, but that's not why I'm doing this. You reminded me what character looks like when no one's watching. My company needs people like that more than it needs another genius." Claire hesitated, her fingers tightening around the envelope. "What if I fail?" she asked quietly. He met her gaze, steady and kind. "Then you fail trying. But something tells me you won't." The cafe clock ticked softly between them. For a moment she thought of all the mornings spent pouring coffee for others, all the nights spent convincing herself that purpose was a luxury she couldn't afford. And then she looked at him, the man whose life had collided with hers once by chance, now offering her a way to rewrite her own story. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice trembling but sure. Ethan's expression softened with relief. As he turned to leave, she called after him. "Ethan?" He paused, smiling. "Thank you for seeing me." He nodded gently. "No, Claire. Thank you for reminding me how to." A year later, the city glowed beneath the spring sun, and Maple and Main Cafe had transformed. The chipped counters were replaced with warm oak, the windows framed by hanging ivy, and a small brass plaque by the door now read, "Designed by Claire Matthews." The same scent of coffee filled the air, but this time it carried the quiet hum of pride. Claire walked through the cafe in a crisp white blouse and soft gray slacks, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She wasn't just serving coffee anymore. She was designing offices, community spaces, and small businesses like this one. Her scholarship had opened doors, but it was her resilience that had kept them open. As she checked a new design plan on her tablet, the bell above the door chimed. She looked up and smiled. Ethan stood there. No entourage, no fanfare, just a man with kind eyes and a familiar calm. "You really did it," he said, glancing around. Claire laughed softly. "You gave me a chance. I just took it seriously." He walked to the counter, running his hand along the polished surface. "You made this place shine. Just like you said, a little grace goes a long way." They shared a quiet moment, both remembering the storm that had started it all. The night she saved a stranger and unknowingly changed her own fate. As he turned to leave, Ethan paused at the door. "I think you saved me twice," and he said. "Once from the wreck, and once from forgetting what matters." Claire's eyes softened. "And you reminded me that kindness doesn't disappear. It just circles back." Outside, the world moved as always, but for a moment everything felt perfectly aligned. Proof that one selfless act could echo forever.